Good morning and welcome to my third YouTube live in a row. I told you last week, my lives are like buses. So enjoy the buses. If you like this kind of format, do let me know actually in the comments. Do you prefer the lives or do you prefer the kind of pre-recorded videos? Because for me, it's actually quite a different experience, whether I do lives or pre-recorded videos. So welcome to all of you who are watching. If you're watching it live, welcome. If you are watching the replay, welcome. And in all cases, please feel free to comment, to let me know what's going on for you. Let me know your thoughts on what we're talking about today. I always love to hear from you, and I really value those of you that spend the time to leave a comment. And of course, as always, if you do enjoy my videos, please do like and share and consider subscribing, because most people aren't subscribed. And I get that because we hear that all the time. I'm not subscribed to lots of channels that I listen to, but I'm trying to make more effort to actually subscribe because I know it makes a big difference. So welcome. My name is Anuska Taylor. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an experienced voice coach and Jungian depth coach using the work of Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And that's what makes my approach to training the voice so unique. So today we are talking about why every challenge in your life, and that could be business, that could be career, that could be health, it could be money, relationships, whatever challenge you are facing is being mirrored in your voice. And I say this all the time, but I'm going to say it again because you can't hear it enough. Your voice doesn't lie. It is always communicating what's going on within at the deepest level. And this is why the inner work is so important. Because if you don't do this inner work, if you don't look at what's really going on within, what's really driving you at the deepest level, you will hit a ceiling in life, in business, in your career, in relationships, in your voice, how you communicate, how you show up, what you allow of your voice, how expressive you allow yourself to be. You can only work on the surface and get results to a certain point, and then you'll just hit a plateau, you'll hit a ceiling. So the inner work is really, really important because the mind ultimately drives everything in our life, including our voice. So this is why in my work, your voice becomes a really powerful tool in your personal growth, in your personal development, because we look at it to see what's really going on within. And then the irony is, as you actually kind of look more deeply at what's driving the patterns, the experiences you're having with your voice or in life, in business, then you can actually integrate those patterns, and then you are really free. Otherwise, you're always going to be trying to compensate. So also, because a big part of my work is voice training, vocal technique, voice physiology. If you've watched some of my other videos, I've done probably earlier on in my YouTube journey, it was more focused on technique and that side of it, because that was kind of where I started. If I'm honest, that was where my training, most of my training started all about the physicality of the voice. But when you really do this inner work and you shift within, any training that you do, any voice work, any public speaking training you do, communication skills training, voice training, will just be far more impactful and you will have far more success. So it all starts from within. And that's really, if you don't take anything else away from this video, that's the point today. And what I want to show you today are 5 very common challenges that we all face, let's be honest, including myself, in life, and how it's being revealed through the voice. Because I can say this to you, but you might be like, yeah, but it doesn't really impact me. My voice is fine, or my voice has got nothing to do with what's going on in my life. So I want to show you how this can show up. Now, just remember as well that we're all unique. We're all individuals. We all have individual unique experiences and challenges in life. Even if on the surface they kind of look the same, we all have unique and individual challenges with our voice. Again, even if on the surface it looks the same. So, just use this in the spirit that it's intended. This is not a black and white. If you've got this, it's this. But this is just to begin to open your mind to how this could be showing up in your life and in your voice. So we're going to talk about the 5 challenges, and these are really common, as I say. The first one is not asking for what you want or need. Now, this could show up. I'm going to give you some examples of how this might show up. So from a business perspective, maybe you run your own business and you don't charge very much for your services. Like you want to charge more, but you feel uncomfortable having that conversation with clients or customers. So you undercharge, you keep your prices low or cheap because it feels safer and easier than having to have that conversation. Maybe in your career, you don't ask for a raise, or you don't ask for much of a raise. Again, you play safe with what you ask for. Or maybe you don't go for that promotion that you really want, but then there's this part of you that comes in and says, oh, well, I don't think you're ready. I don't think you're good enough. I don't think you've got the expertise yet. You need a few more years of experience. So does any of that resonate? So this is how it might show up in your business or career, depending on whether you run your own business or whether you work for someone else. But also in terms of relationships, whether this is personal, romantic, familial relationships, whatever kind of relationship we're talking about, you don't speak up and you don't share what's really going on for you. You don't express what you need in a relationship. This was definitely something for me in my, well, probably actually even in my last sort of major relationship. There were times when I really struggled to ask for what I wanted, to ask for what I needed. And I think this is very common. We think that people should just know. Well, you should just know that this is what I want or this is what I need. But it's really because we're unwilling to be uncomfortable and have that conversation. So just think about in your own life where this might show up, if this resonates with you in relationships, in business, and just start to think about that or your career. So what this is pointing to emotionally is a feeling of inadequacy and unworthiness, which I think we all struggle with to a greater or lesser extent, mainly because the ego by definition doesn't feel worthy of anything. The ego is very insecure and we all have an ego. So we're living with this. It's just whether we wake up to the truth of it or not. And the more identified with the ego you are, and the more you think that who you are is your ego, the more you're going to struggle with this sort of being driven by this feeling of inadequacy and unworthiness. So that's really what's driving this fear of speaking up, this fear of asking for what you want, this fear of saying what it is that you need, because you fear the response back and you don't really believe in your value and your worthiness to have what it is that you want. So how might this show up in the voice then? So a very common way this can show up in the voice is a lack of conviction and authority when you speak. So the voice sounds very doubtful, very hesitant. There's almost an apologeticness. Is that a word? It is now. Apologeticness to your voice, a powerlessness, an uncertainty. And the thing is, people feel that. You don't have to say, I feel unworthy. You don't have to say, I don't feel adequate to ask for this. People feel it in your energy. They hear it in your voice. Even if you pick the perfect words, it will come through in your vocal energy, in your physical energy. And that's what we're all reading. We're not really listening to the words. So that's what we're reading first and foremost. So think about this first one for you. Does that resonate? Does that actually make any sense to you? Sorry, if you can hear my cat in the background. If anyone has got any pets, you will know that they do like to, particularly cats, they like to get involved as soon as you press go on any kind of Zoom call or live stream. And now she's pacing around and who knows, she might jump up behind me in a minute to make her presence known. So that's number one. So this not asking for what you want or need, and something that I definitely have struggled with myself over the years. And I've had to really, really challenge myself to have those conversations. Number two is struggling with sales. Now, I suppose typically we think of sales as business. It's like I have a service or a product that I'm trying to sell to you, and you reward me through paying me. So we can think of sales in that sense. So in your business or career, maybe you're in a very sales-driven role and you struggle to make sales. You struggle to get that consistency of sales. But I suppose more broadly, we can think of sales as an exchange. So it's not just an exchange of products or services for money or resources, but it's an exchange of information, of ideas, of energy. And that's what we can think about in terms of a relationship. So it's an exchange between two people of this kind of this energetic exchange, particularly in a romantic relationship. So do you avoid talking about yourself? If we're thinking about relationships here and this exchange of ideas, do you avoid sharing things about yourself? Do you let the other person sort of do most of the talking and you just sit there quietly, maybe ask the odd question, but you really let them drive the conversation and talk about themselves? Do you sort of hide and shy away from really sharing about yourself? And even think about in a networking situation or a social situation, do you tend to be the person that just stands quietly and lets other people speak? Or do you confidently talk about yourself and share what's going on in your life? So that's a big, big part of this sort of sales idea. Now, this is really, so I've just got looking at my notes here. This is really a fear of rejection and criticism. What we're running away from is this fear of rejection and criticism. Because if I talk about myself, or if I ask, if I'm trying to sell you something and you reject me or you're not interested, or if I'm talking about myself in a social situation, or I'm talking about myself and things that I'm really struggling with, and you're not interested, or you just dismiss me, or you walk away, it brings up those fears of rejection and criticism. And again, we can all relate to this. But the thing is, hopefully you can start to see that if this is what you're running away from, you're going to be running away from this in all areas of your life. So how it shows up in the voice is, as I said, you avoid sharing your voice. And this could be in the very literal sense, like you avoid sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas in that kind of situation. You avoid, when talking to a customer or a client, really sharing the benefits of how this product or service can help them. You sort of pull back, you hold back. You probably struggle to really have an opinion, stand for something. You might be someone that tends to just follow, I talked about this last week, but follow the herd. You know, you don't really have an opinion about anything. You just go with the masses. You go with, well, everyone else in my family thinks this, so this is what I'm going to follow. So start to think about that. Do you really own your own voice? And then, so there's not the sort of the literal voice, but also the physical voice. So then from that perspective, the physical voice is suppressed. It's pulled back. It's shut down. So it's both in a sort of figurative and a literal sense, because it could be sharing your voice. You could be writing your ideas. You don't have to necessarily express them. But in some way, you are holding back. You are not sharing what's going on for you because there's this deeper fear of being rejected. So that's what you've got to look at. And if you don't look at that, it's just going to keep driving you in every area of your life. So that's number 2. Number 3 is you feel like life has become a bit stagnant. So it could be in relationships, it could be career, it could be business, or just broadly, maybe you're trying to lose weight. There could be some area of your life and you just feel like nothing is really changing, nothing is really happening. It's all a bit stagnant. And this is really about leaving the comfort zone, leaving the familiar, and having the courage to actually do something you've never done before, go for something you've never gone for before. And the ego, by definition, again, wants to stay in the comfort zone. It wants to stay around the familiar and what feels secure, because that up until now has kept you safe, what you've experienced. So from the ego's perspective, staying in your comfort zone is the best possible option you have to stay alive. So it's all about survival from the ego. It's all fear-based, it's all survival-based. And so think about this in your own life in terms of if you feel stagnant, is there a fear of being really seen and heard? Because normally it's about stepping outside, doing something you've never done before, having conversations you've never had before, visiting places you've never visited before, doing something you've never tried. And that requires a lot of courage. So from this perspective, then, when we fear being seen or heard, the voice follows suit. So the voice might lack clarity because we don't really want to be heard. So we don't really want to be understood. The voice might lack energy because, again, if the voice lacks energy and is quite dull and boring to listen to, well, then people aren't going to stick around. So all of this is really about, don't listen to me. I'm going to make it difficult for you to understand me, and I'm going to make it difficult for you to want to engage with me because my voice sounds so boring when I do speak. Now, this isn't conscious. You're not necessarily deliberately doing this. So this isn't to beat yourself up, but it's just to become aware of how we use the voice as a defense mechanism, as a way to emotionally protect ourselves. So again, so coming back to how this might show up, then you're probably going to sound fairly dreary, boring, monotonous when you speak, because that keeps everyone away. You might sound very mumbled. Your voice, you might speak really fast so no one can really hear you. So they have to work really hard, and no one really wants to work that hard to listen to anyone. If it's too hard, we just switch off, unless we have to listen to you. And so in all cases, really here, we're just trying to blend in. My cat is so loud. I don't know if you can hear her in the background. The more I ignore her, the more loud she gets, which is quite interesting, actually, because she is very much the opposite of fearing being seen and heard. She just does this all night. So yeah, very interesting that this is the topic. But yeah, in some level, you don't want to be seen and heard, unlike my cat Luna, that definitely wants to be seen and heard right now. Now, number 4 is a big one, and I think particularly for women, and I've certainly seen this in the women in my life, including my mum and myself. This is, we don't want to ask for help. Now, in business or career, this might show up as avoiding delegating. So we have a team, but we end up just doing everything. We don't want to really delegate to anyone. Or if we do delegate, then we're micromanaging them to make sure they do it correctly. Or maybe we run our own business and we avoid actually hiring someone or people to help us. And so there's this sense of hyper independence, like I have to have everything under control and I have to do it myself because actually I don't think anyone else can do it. And what this is really about is a fear of losing control. But underneath that, there's a deep distrust in life, in the world, in other people. So you don't really trust anyone to do anything for you. So I have to do everything by myself, which on some level of independence is really important. But when it becomes hyper independence, like what I'm talking about here, it's really a defense mechanism. It's not actually, it's not really serving you. It's actually really hindering you from growing. So this fear of losing control, and again, by definition, the ego doesn't ever want to lose control. That's just part of the way it's made. It always wants to try and be in control. And so when you're trying to grip and grasp and control things, you know that that's the ego and it's not really who you are. So how might the voice show up? From my perspective, when we're trying to control anything, and just generally in life and even in our body, if we really were to tune into our body when we're trying to control, the body, the voice tenses. It becomes very defensive. It becomes very guarded. And so the sound then, the resulting sound of that, because the voice can't emerge, the voice can't come out, sounds very harsh, sounds very clipped, sounds very tense, strained, tight, rigid. So maybe, there's a lot of rigidity in your body when you speak and your face doesn't move and everything is just really tense and tight. So that's often just we're trying to control. And again, as I said, if this is you, you don't really trust people to take care of things. I've seen this a lot as well with mothers, I think, particularly, and certainly my own mother. She used to complain that no one helped her, but then she never would let anyone help her. And so is that you? Do you recognize that part of yourself? It's like you feel resentful that no one helps you, but when people offer, you say, no, I'll do it. Because if they do something, it's never quite right, it's never good enough. And so, people just stop offering to help. Or you simply just don't ask in the first place. Like there's some kind of weakness around asking for help. So I'm just going to try and muddle through this by myself. And of course, if we don't tell people we need help, then they can't help us. But the ego thinks, well, they should just know that I need help. So yeah, just start to sort of think about that in your own life around asking for help, allowing people to help, delegating, whether it's in your business, your career, at home. Do you ask the children to help you? Do you ask your husband, your wife to help you? Or do you just try and do everything by yourself and then feel resentful that no one's helping you? And then the final one, which, you could argue they're all kind of interrelated, but I think I sort of separated them out because I saw these as quite distinct patterns that I have noticed in myself and other people, is struggling to connect with people personally on a more emotional basis. So I find this particularly with male clients that I work with, and that's often one of the reasons they'll come and work with me, because in their business, when they're in a business meeting, when they're in a professional setting, they feel very confident. They can talk about whatever the industry is they're in, whatever the product or service it is that they are offering, and they feel very confident in those situations. But as soon as the conversation becomes more vulnerable, becomes more emotional, that's when they really begin to sort of struggle and shut down. So is this you? Are you more on that logical, analytical side of the fence? And you're comfortable in any conversations that, let's say, are more black and white, but where it becomes more vulnerable and emotional, and it's messier, because emotions by definition are illogical and messy. So the ego doesn't want to go there because I don't know how to deal with this. So we tend to shy away then from building those more deeper emotional connections with people, which, let's face it, is relationship. And relationships with others, particularly romantic relationships, are inherently messy and illogical. You just have to watch yourself in a relationship, and the things that trigger you or the things that upset you, it sometimes seems very illogical, because to the adult mind it is illogical, but as a child it made perfect sense to you. But you're still being driven by the 5-year-old within. It's just you're now in an adult body, you might have a successful career, you might have a family, and so the mind can't compute that two things could be true at the same time. So if you struggle to emotionally connect, so let's say you're at a networking meeting or you're having drinks and you just don't know what to say to people, you just go quiet, you just shut down, you just have no conversation. If you're not talking about business or the weather or where you went on holiday, you don't know how to connect with people. This again is a fear of losing control, but it's a different kind of, I would say it's a different kind of driver. So whereas they're not asking for help is more a lack of trust. This one is more around a fear of coming across as weak and vulnerable. And I think, again, for men are conditioned to see emotions as weak, and weakness is a vulnerability, and I don't want to look weak and vulnerable. But of course we know that's not true, but that's for a lot of men how they've been conditioned, which I think is why for many of the private male clients I work with, this is something that they struggle with. So this fear of losing control, being perceived as weak, being perceived as not having it all together, almost allowing this kind of messiness, this illogical part of you to come out. I've got to have it all analytical and black and white, and it's all got to make perfect sense to me. So in this scenario, you're probably going to struggle to sound expressive, to sound engaging, to have that emotion sort of flowing through your voice. The voice is probably going to struggle to emote. And this could come across as a monotonous voice, very flat tone. Maybe you have kind of one volume, one pitch when you speak, voices pulled back. But in some way, you're not connected emotionally to your voice and to your words. So what you'll find then probably is, you might be able to have some surface conversations with people, but then people might move on and go and talk to someone else, because it's like, well, I don't really feel this. It feels very kind of rigid and stiff, this conversation, and a bit boring. So I'm just going to go and talk to someone else. So again, it's just about being very honest with yourself, first of all, like what resonates with you in terms of these challenges that I'm sharing, because I think we can all relate to at least one of these. I know I can. So again, coming back to the start of this, it's really about doing your own inner work and starting to identify what's the real fear that I'm running away from here. Is it a fear of losing control? Is it a fear of being criticized and rejected? Like, what is it that I'm really fearing? So let me give you some questions you can ask yourself now, and I'll give you an example of how you can start to look at this. But just remember that everyone's individual. So I'm just giving you some general ideas and thoughts on how to work with this. But first of all, think about what is a big challenge that you're facing in your life. And it could be in any area of your life. And I'll use the last example of this emotional kind of disconnection with people, because I think it's very common, particularly, as I say, amongst the male clients that I work with. So let's say that that's the challenge. I can't emotionally connect with people. Unless it's very logical and analytical and businesslike and professional, people don't seem to want to talk to me. So identify the challenge, and then identify, like, what are the limitations that you perceive in your voice? So even if you don't have the technical understanding of your voice, there will be things that you're already aware of where your voice is limited. So in this case, for example, it might be that when you listen back to a recording of your voice just doesn't sound very inspiring. It doesn't sound very engaging. It sounds really boring to listen to. So you're like, okay, well, I'm challenged with emotional connection. My voice sounds kind of boring and dull when I listen back to a recording. So then you want to ask yourself, how might this vocal habit protect me or serve me? Because the ego is all about survival. So this habit that's limiting you is driven by the ego, and it is about trying to protect you. So you have to get to the root of that, because if you just try and work on the surface, this is where you hit a ceiling. This is where you hit a plateau. This is where you feel like nothing you do really changes anything. So how might this habit serve you? Well, we've already kind of alluded to this. It keeps people away. In short, it keeps people away. If you don't sound very inspiring to listen to, if your voice sounds dreary and uninteresting to listen to, people are not going to stick around. They might stick around because they have to, but then they'll move on as soon as they can. And maybe to be polite. Do you know what I mean? It might be like, I have to talk to this person because you're my boss, but as soon as I can get away, I'm going to get away. And the conversation kind of stays very surface. So you keep people away, you keep the conversation surface, stays very high level, and it serves you because it keeps you feeling in some level of being in control. Yeah, you don't have to go anywhere that's really uncomfortable. I'm in control. I basically keep people away. I have this conversation that makes me feel good about myself because I talk about business or I talk about my career or whatever. And then people leave, and that's great because I don't want to talk about anything else. So that's the next thing. So how might this vocal habit serve you, protect you? Now, this is where the transformation really starts to occur, because insight alone will not create transformation. So you might be very clear on your challenge and where your voice is holding you back. And even you might start to see, okay, I can see how me having that vocal habit would protect me. And I can see where that might have come from too, because you might want to explore that. Like, why would I have created this habit in the first place? Most likely in early childhood. Where did I learn to push people away with my voice on some level? Might be unconscious, but energetically, where did I learn this? And where is my first sort of memory of this in terms of keeping me safe? So then the next question is, well, what do I avoid feeling? And this is where we start to open up. So we have the insight around what the pattern is about and the fact that there is something there in the first place and what it's about and maybe where it's come from. But then the transformation is in feeling the emotion that you've spent your whole life not wanting to feel, because you've created this pattern to avoid feeling it. So in this case, it would be vulnerability. I don't want to feel vulnerable. I want to feel in control. I want to feel in control of a conversation and not be in this situation where I don't know what to say, or it's getting too deep. The conversation's getting uncomfortable. I don't know how to be in this kind of conversation. I'm just not comfortable. I don't have these conversations with anyone. But what I want you to do here, which is the next kind of stage, is when you think about this, what do you feel in your body? Because it's one thing to intellectually say, oh yeah, well, I don't want to feel vulnerability, but you're still connected from your body. It's all in the mind. but you want to bring it into the body, like presence it into the body. So what do you feel physically in your body when you think about having those deeper, more uncomfortable, vulnerable conversations about emotional stuff? So maybe, for example, you feel a constriction in your throat. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest. Maybe your heart rate is going 10 to the dozen. Maybe you feel even nauseous. You know, you've got butterflies in your stomach. Maybe you feel a sense of panic. And again, I guess the physical symptoms would be kind of similar to what we've talked about. But think, not even think. So don't think about this. I want you to feel this. Feel the emotions. Because this is where we begin to sort of unlock the pattern. Because if we just stay in the intellect of intellectually knowing this is what I do, this is why I do it, this is what happens, nothing will actually change. You're just now very insightful, but nothing's changing. The change happens in feeling the emotion, in going towards the thing that you've run away from. But you go towards it from this new understanding that this pattern was created by you as a child to keep you safe, but it isn't who you are. If you think it's who you are, it's going to feel terrifying to confront it. But if you really start to get, and this is where the deeper spiritual work comes in, and why I love Jung's work, because I see him more as a spiritual psychologist versus more of that sort of just focusing on the intellect, that you've really got to start to feel the emotions that you've been running away from. So sit with the tightness in your chest, breathe into the tightness into your chest, breathe into the feeling like you've got butterflies in your stomach or your throat is tightening. Breathe into it, but without getting too caught up in the story. Because again, the ego wants to take us out of this as quickly as possible. We feel a feeling in our body. We're like, this feels really uncomfortable. I don't want to feel this. Let me go into a story about why I feel this, and then I don't have to feel it. So the challenge is to stay in the feeling. And that's what most people don't want to do. And I promise you, if you stay in the feeling, it will begin to dissipate. But when we keep running away from it, when we keep avoiding situations so I don't have to feel vulnerable or I don't have to risk rejection, you're actually giving it more and more energy. And as Jung said, what we resist persists. So it's just going to persist. It's a snowball that's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So it's the challenge is, can I sit with the emotion? Now, of course, if you've got some more serious sort of mental health issues, then you would do this with a therapist. But I think for a lot of people, I mean, I always say we've all got mental health issues because we've all got an ego. It's just to the degree that they kind of consume us. So some people might need to do this and work with a therapist. But I think for a lot of people, if you basically got a healthy functioning mind, you can do this by yourself, but it's being willing to sit in the discomfort of the feeling. Drop the story, allow yourself to feel whatever is feeling, knowing that it isn't who you really are. It's not the truth of who you are. It's just the ego defenses. But there's a great quote by Joseph Campbell, which I love. And this really sums this up. And maybe this is a good way to end. He says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And the cave here being feeling the emotion. Feeling this uncomfortable emotion is really where the treasure is, because from that place, that's where you can really transcend it, because you don't have the same level of fear around it anymore. And you're okay with feeling that constriction, that tension. It doesn't define you because you know it's not who you really are. So go through those questions and see if you can sit with it. I do have on my channel a meditation, or more like a guided, I can't remember what I even called it. I'll post it at the end. But it will take you through this more sort of somatic way of dealing with this kind of thing in terms of being in the body. Because I think we live in a world where we're all up here, but it's about getting into your heart, getting into your body. That's where the transformation happens. And just remember, as I said, this pattern served you as a child. So we're not making it wrong. We're not making it wrong that you avoided vulnerable conversations or you avoided situations where you might be criticized or judged. We all do it. We all are a product of our upbringing. But it's just recognizing that it isn't who you are. It served you to a point, and now you're ready to transcend it. And if you're watching my channel, then you are on some level ready for this, even if you're not quite ready. But on some level, this is resonating with you. So it is very difficult to do by yourself. I'm not going to lie. I've worked with many coaches over the last 8-10 years, because the ego is very slippery, and the ego knows you best. Your ego knows exactly what to say to you to get you to pull back, to get you to run away, to get you to avoid those situations, to not put yourself out there. And it will sound very convincing to you as well, because your ego knows exactly what you need to hear. And it will be different to what I need to hear, but your ego knows what it needs to say to you. And I argue, I always say this all the time, I always think the more intelligent you are, the more intelligent your ego. So it's almost worse when you are really intelligent, because your ego is more sophisticated. So if you do want help with this deeper transformation, not only in your voice, but just more broadly, just finding more freedom in life, in business, in your career, in relationships, and as a byproduct, your voice will emerge. This is the thing, but you've got to put the horse before the cart. Most people are trying to put the cart before the horse. Let me just do some voice exercises, but I don't really need to deal with the other inner work stuff. That will just whatever. I don't need to think about that. You do need to think about that if you want real freedom when you communicate and you speak. So if this is something of interest, you can book a free 30-minute voice consult if you are ready for this deeper transformation. My programs start from a 3-month program, Speak with Impact. That's the minimum I work with people, because this work is so deep. And that would be the absolute minimum. I mean, most people, to be honest, work with me for at least a year, because once you start getting into this, you realize there's so much depth to it, and it's so much more beyond your voice. And so many people I work with, after we've worked together, the voice sort of transforms, but also their life transforms. You know, they just open themselves up more broadly in their relationships, in business, in career, and in their health, in everything. So if you're ready for this, you can book a 30-minute free voice consult. The links will be below, or are below. Or if you just want to have that direct experience first, you can book a 60-minute private voice coaching session. If you then choose to continue to a full package, a full program, you do actually get that session complimentary. But so it really depends on what you want. But my work is really for people that want a deeper approach to transformation. It's a personal transformation, but we use the voice as a tool for that personal transformation. And you get the voice that you want, but it actually frees you more broadly. You're not getting the voice from the ego perspective. It's actually a much deeper, more powerful transformation. So if you've got any questions, please post them below. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, whatever you are doing. And I will maybe be back next week for another live. Let me see how the week goes. But have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.